Hello and welcome to the D
and A of Home Interiors, the podcast which is all about empowering you to make confident interior and furnishing decisions for your home. I'm Audrey, founder of Audrey Whelan Interior Design.
And I'm Deirdre, founder of youfurnish.com, such 100 plus furniture retailers on one website. The DNA of Home Interiors is proudly sponsored by checkatrade.com. If you need help with your next home improvement project, you can search from over 39,000 recommended, vetted and monitored trades on checkatrade.com. Today's topic is around hallways and entrances. And it's one of my sort of guilty pleasures of rooms or spaces that I really, really like. And it's because you come to the door, I suppose, and you've got that anticipation. What is behind the door? And I've seen some fabulous hallways. And then I've also seen some dark, very tight, miserable hallways. And what can we do to sort of get it right? And I suppose the first thing is that it starts with the door.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like your first impression, isn't it? And sometimes I find, there'll be an amazing door colour outside, but then you go inside and it's like it hasn't been thought about.
So looking at the door then to begin with, Audrey, aesthetically, I suppose we're all going to have a particular door maybe that we like or dislike more. So I'm sort of thinking about whether it's the PVC versus a wooden door. One thing that I'm a big fan of indoors is where you actually have some glass, because of course often, especially if you're in a terraced house, you don't have any other windows coming into the hallway. So this is the only bit of natural light that you can get. So whether it's the piece of glass at the very top of the door, if you've got it on the frame either side of the door or even built into the door, I really recommend putting glass. And of course, it doesn't have to be just plain glass. It can be stained glass or something that gives additional privacy as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I think even, that piece of glass above, like the fan light, especially in like a period property in maybe a Victorian or a Georgian property where you might get glass up high like that. It's amazing how much light even just that can bring in and what a difference it might make. Sometimes people might have like a little window in the hall if it's not sort of mid-terrace, or maybe a little window up in the landing, and, that can help a lot as well. But depending on how much or how little daylight you do have in that space, it's that would certainly influence then, the best way to go about choosing materials and colours, to make it feel how you want.
Exactly. And then once we open the front door and we step inside, of course, the first thing that we're greeted on is maybe it's not the first thing visually we see, but we step onto a floor.
Yes.
And, sometimes that's carpet, which I think maybe isn't necessarily that practical because you don't know where people's shoes are coming in from, if it's wet or whatever that may be. We've wooden floor. There is tiles, which of course are great to keep clean. Or we could have a mat. But how do you go about thinking of flooring? And also, where does the flooring for the hallway stop?
And
yes. The other flooring begin, because this is something I think is quite tricky to gauge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, practicality really has to overrule everything else here. I mean, if you've got sort of, dogs coming in and out, or, push chairs with children, all of these things are sort of impossible to ensure cleanliness around. So yeah, carpet is going to be a tricky one. So I do think in most cases, I mean, tiles are probably, the easiest to keep clean, but not to everybody's preference. Wood floors then probably next in line, but obviously there is more maintenance and you don't want them to get too wet. You can consider something like a luxury vinyl tile, which, gives you that wood effect, but is a lot more durable, when it does get sort of a bit muddy or damp. It's easier to maintain and keep clean. And then I suppose, like with all these areas around the home, I'd say rather than think, well, tiles would just be too cold, full stop, not having it. Well, think about what else you would do in the space. So, for example, is there a staircase and might you want to put a carpet on the stairs? So in that case, you're starting to get contrast with the tiled floor. So although the tiles themselves are cold in appearance, when you put them next to a carpet, less so visually, because you've got that nice mix of materials starting to form. I think if you've got an exposed wooden staircase and you're going to maybe, sand and seal it or paint it in a colour, then you may feel that combined with the tiles, it gives you a colder, harsher atmosphere. Even just your kind of sound levels in the hallway are going to feel different without that carpet. So, if you're going down that route, then I'd say, well, actually, do you have scope maybe for a long, thin rug? So like a runner rug to put in your hallway. Again, for some people, just practically, that's not really an option if they do need to, wheel prams up and down, or if they've dogs running up and down. But otherwise, it's something that can look great and can really make the hallway feel like more of a room.
Yeah, and I think I like that concept of making it feel like a room, because then it's not necessarily just a place that we're passing through, but maybe you can stop and find some enjoyment. And we will come back to that, because I think it sort of ties into this point that I'm about to raise, which is, we step in, I mentioned, on the floor, but what we visually see is quite often the walls. Now, I know that people sort of sometimes use a one color, or they use a dividing rail, mix of wallpaper, sometimes even a mix of tiles halfway up the wall. What do you sort of advise, or what do you find people consider when choosing one thing versus the other in terms of the walls?
So I feel, a typical hallway actually has a huge amount of wall relative to the size of the space. So it's not like another room where you might say, well, we'll put a few big plush sofas in, and that sort of softens the space. So I think, the walls are kind of even more important as a consideration, because you've got less other things that you can put in there or put up against them. And particularly when you have a staircase and, that's that wall on the side of the staircase, which sort of goes up double height. If that's just very neutral, very pale with nothing on it, it can actually make the whole hallway and landing, feel quite soulless. So I think if it's a period property, Victorian house or Edwardian house, sometimes you will see where perhaps there's a dado rail and that there's two paint colours, one below the rail and one above, or you may see wallpaper above or below. That can be a great way to divide up that wall space. So that can run up the stairway sort of diagonally, as well as being like horizontal round the ground floor hallway area. But obviously, if it's not a period property, or you just don't like that idea of dividing up in that kind of traditional way, there's a few other things you could do. Obviously there's, pictures and mirrors, which we can talk about in a bit more detail, but kind of sticking with the paint and the wallpaper ideas, I'd say one thing I've seen recently, which I loved, was to actually just create a line. So not the dado rail, not that traditional kind of idea, but it's almost taking that into a more contemporary kind of approach, and just having a divide, and below it having like a colour in a gloss paint, and then above it having the same colour in a matte finish. And this visually breaks things up, because you get the reflection lower down on the gloss, but then you don't get it up above. But also it's really, really practical, because the gloss paint is, you can actually wipe it down and it's easy.
I was going to bring it back to practical. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's kind of
if the dog gives a shake as he comes in, it would be pretty easy to wipe it down.
Yeah, exactly. If some, how it is. Plenty of people, especially in cities, have to bring bikes through hallways, or anything else. Obviously, if it's a terrace property, you don't have the luxury of being able to bring things sort of round, the side of the house out to a garden shed or something. If you've got any people coming in to do work in your house, any tradespeople, everything's sort of coming in and out through that hallway. Even as simple as a new item of furniture, and anything can cause scuffs on walls, as we all know. So that's that's something I quite liked because it's sort of it's kind of like a double win. It looks great, and then it also is very practical as well. And then the other thing would be to consider a wallpaper. So even if it's not dividing the wall like I first described with a dado rail, and even a wallpaper on that tall wall, you know, that goes right up to the landing. And often when I first mention wallpaper to people, they kind of, you know, shy away from the idea mainly for practical reasons, because they think, well, actually back to that kind of scuffing thing of the sticky fingers or dogs and that. But my response to that would be there's actually a huge range of vinyl wall coverings. So some of these, you know, that come in a really matte finish, you wouldn't even know that they're vinyl to look at, or indeed sometimes to touch. But the thing is, they're not porous like a paper, so they're really easy to clean. And in fact, you know, easier than any paint really, because of that durability, you know, of the finish. So that can be quite a good thing. So if you do want some texture or pattern into the space, you can do it that way.
That's a great idea. You mentioned something super interesting, and it was around doing the choice of the colors. So, whatever the material is, doing the choice of the colors last for the hallway. Now, why is this? Because it's the first place that people come in. So, as guests, it's their first chance to make a full impression. But actually, we should think about it last versus all the other rooms.
Yeah. So, the reason behind this idea is because you obviously have to make decisions in lots of different rooms in the property. And what I think is great then is to be able to have the whole unify those. So not that it has to be the same as those, but that you're able to consider what you're going to do in any room that you can see into. And then from the hallway, if you've got doors open into your living room or your kitchen, you're happy that your paint colours are, you know, as I say, not necessarily the same, but just that they all work with each other. Whereas if you decide your hall first, then you may feel you're a little bit limited with what you then decide in the other rooms. And at the end of the day, although it is your first impression, I do think more important than that is to prioritize the decisions in the rooms that you're going to spend most time in. So usually when I first meet a client and they say, oh, I want to make decisions in, you know, 4 or 5 rooms, maybe I'll say, well, you know, what is the most important room? You know, is it the living room? Is it the kitchen? Where will we start? Where will we give ourselves the most free rein? You know, and then as we continue from room to room after that, there will no doubt be things that crop up in conversation about, well, we're doing that in the other room. Of course, in these conversations, we can change and, you know, change the decision in the first room, but it gives a sense of direction and a kind of priority order then.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially around choosing your first priority room, so that you're reducing then the constraining factors that you might later have to take into consideration. And I do personally like when you walk through a hallway that you've got the doors open and you've got glimpses into the rooms rather than just all the doors closed. And of course, if it's very different to what those rooms are, you could have a bit of a clash scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So even back to your first question on the flooring, I think, you know, it's great to not just consider, say, the staircase, like I mentioned, that might contrast quite nicely and warmly with the tiled floor, but also to have a sense of what you're going to do in those other rooms. So if it is tiles in the hallway, are you going to step off those tiles onto other tiles in a kitchen or onto wood or carpet, and to actually be able to allow those decisions to influence, you know, getting it right in the hallway?
Yeah, I've seen some fabulous examples of people actually using the same tiles in the hallway right through into the kitchen.
Yeah.
And it just has this sense of continuation of a one bigger space. And I think it actually works really, really well. Just depends. It's harder to pick one tile than two if you've got some favorites out there.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I think, you know, what you described, I've seen a few times lately, especially where there's maybe a glass door into the kitchen. And that can be amazing then because, you know, you can get your privacy by closing the door sort of in terms of sound. Obviously, you can still see through, but particularly if the hall is maybe on the small side or quite narrow, the fact that that flooring continues then and you can see it even when the door is closed, it definitely increases the sense of space in the hallway.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. And actually, it's probably one we've talked about the front door in terms of having glass in that, but there may be other doors that go off the hallway that you can have glass in, especially if it's a very dark area that you can try and steal some of the light from those other rooms.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, one more thing I would say on flooring, I'm just thinking about my own hallway, which I've got an extremely quirky hallway because our door is on the side of the house. But actually, what we have is an actual piece of entrance matting. So this isn't something that you often see in a residential property, but rather than having just a free floating mat that might move around, if you are thinking of a flooring in the hall, which isn't as practical as you would maybe like it to be, an option is to not bring it to the front door, stop it short, and actually have a big square or rectangle of entrance matting. So this is the stuff that you would tend to see used more commercially, so at the front of an office space or something. But
yes, the hotels as you walk in.
But it used to just come in that kind of brown, sort of pale brown colour. Now it comes in so many different colours. So, you can have black, or you can have like green or blue, lots of different colours. But I think with black...
I thought you were going to stop with black. It comes in so many colours, from brown to black.
I was just thinking to myself, I think I would use black, but lots of other, if you want to be daring, lots of other colours. But what I would probably do is go for something muted and then let the flooring itself kind of stand out. But I think, that can be a practical way of doing it. And then also it's not like a free floating mat that can sort of get kicked around and, not really protect your floor in the way you'd hoped.
Yeah, no, that's a very good idea, I think, because mats can be getting stuck under the doorways or moving about, so they can be a nuisance at times. Now, what I find interesting, and I've mentioned it quite a lot in this episode, is light and how we can create the illusion of light if we don't have it. So when you have your wall coverings picked out, I love the idea of introducing some mirrors which can bounce the light off of each other and back. And I also think a mirror is a really good addition to a hallway in case you want to do one last check as you're about to go out the door. Have I done my mascara or whatever it is in the morning? But there's so many other things that we can put on the walls as well. And, there's some fabulous gallery walls, great pictures, be it, artwork, or actually introducing the family to people who come in so that they realize that, oh, yes, this is a kid's house, there's kids. That sort of story that you can create. You're nearly going on a journey as you go through the hall.
Yeah, it's really all part of that first impression, isn't it? It kind of sets the scene and you're almost like meeting the people, behind the hallway, the people who live there. And when you mentioned gallery wall, I absolutely love the idea of putting lots and lots of frames kind of running up a staircase. I think that can solve that problem I mentioned earlier about sometimes that wall just feeling really kind of barren and a bit soulless, because it's so high and it can just feel so plain and empty. So that can be quite good. It can be something that you can add to over time as well. So you can start by kind of spacing them out and then fill in as you go with smaller frames. Alternatively, if you've got just a wall on the ground floor, kind of between doors, it can be quite nice, to put family photographs. And I too love the idea of a mirror. Full length if you can. I think it really does bounce so much light around. And, if not, just a wall mirror. But there's some great mirrors around at the moment with like a little shelf on it maybe, or you can put a little plant on it, things like that. Or if not, you could, put a shelf on the wall and put a mirror above. Quite like round mirrors. As you know, I love round things anyway. I'm always talking about round tables, round mirrors. But I think hallways can be very boxy and linear, with all the, if you've got the staircase and sort of obviously, they tend to be long and narrow. So a round mirror then can really break up, that linear aspect of the room.
Yes. I think it is. I think of them as being very rectangular and long. So I definitely like to bring that contrast of some round or freeform into your hallway. So what we have is lighting that you might have some beautiful natural light hopefully coming through. But if not, like, lighting can really make a hallway And I love when you walk by some of the period properties and you can see a glimpse of a chandelier through that little slither of glass above the door. And I think it just looks so opulent.
Yeah.
But the hallway needs to have different types of lighting. And you might be thinking why it's on as you walk through. But actually, if everybody is leaving late at night, you're sort of looking for your coat, you're looking for your keys, some proper lighting so that you can see what you're doing is very important. But also, I think some nice soft lighting as people are just moving through the hallway. Maybe they're leaving the sitting room to go up to the bathroom. So whether that's some wall lights that are facing upwards, just having some mood lighting, maybe a nice lamp, because you don't want it to be this dark space when you leave the living room to go to your bedroom at night and in between. I think you can really make it feel a little bit cozy, and in particular in the winter time, by having some lighting. Now, it can be quite tricky because I suppose you need to consider where your plugs are if you've got lamps and things like that. And if it's small and narrow, maybe you don't have the room for any of that. What would your advice be to people, Audrey?
So, yeah, when you said, first of all, the chandeliers, I thought, yeah, I'm a big fan of that as well. In fact, as often as I can, I try to get ceiling lights, like pendant lights of some description in, rather than maybe spotlights that are a bit more harsh, so that you really can get some atmosphere into the hallway, and back to that idea of it feeling more like a room and not just, a purely kind of functional, more utilitarian space. So I think depending on, the style and maybe the age of the property, chandelier might be great, or in other cases it might want to be something much more contemporary. Sometimes I quite like the idea of a light that almost looks like like an outdoor light, like, I'm trying to think of the correct word for this, like a caged kind of bulb. So you might have like antique brass, so sort of a browny black brass, with glass, and then you'd have like maybe a vintage light bulb inside, so you see the bulb. But things like that can be quite nice, and you see them from outdoors. When you come in, it just has that slightly outdoorsy feel as you come in, particularly if they're paired with maybe patterned tiles and things, again, which just have that slight transitionary feel from outdoors to indoors. But then I do agree as well that variational light is also important in the hallway, as it is in any room in the house. And I think it is something that gets overlooked often in a hallway. And if it is that you're doing a refurbishment and you've got the opportunity to put sockets in, it's brilliant to get some sockets in the hallway, because often that won't be something that's already there in an older property. And then if you've got space either for like a console table and a lamp on top, or if there isn't space for console table, maybe it is a wall light, or a shelf with a light on it. But that way you can get some lighting at lower level. So that's quite good.
Yes. Quick shout out for our sponsor, checkatrade.com. Search recommended tradespeople online with checkatrade.com. Thinking of storage then, so we've sort of mentioned having lighting. If you got a lamp, you might need a table. Should we think of a long, thin console table versus looking at our coat racks? How are we going to use the hallway? Do we need some shoe storage? And I saw a great solution lately, actually, Audrey, where the owners of this property, they have a young child. So they have a pram, and they didn't want the pram to be just left in the hallway. So they actually had like a little cutout into the side where they took it off their living room, but you can just push the pram in there by taking that corner. So it's out of your visual sight as you walk in. And I just thought, actually, I really like that you've done that, because you've thought about how you're going to be using it right now. As the first child, they've since gone on to have a second child. So for the next 5 years, you're going to have a pram, and you don't want to walk around it. You want to have a place for it. And I just thought, amazing.
Wow.
Like, super amazing. Yeah. Good on you for having the courage to go and take a little bit of your living room, which was a front living room, which you wouldn't use all that much, to create that solution for themselves. And, that's something that you could use. You mentioned for bikes as well. I've seen some nice solutions where if it's a really high hallway, that they've actually sort of roped them up and they can lift them up to the ceiling nearly. But there is some pretty nifty things you can do. And it's just a matter of thinking, is it coat racks or shoes or what it is that you're going to be storing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you first said about that solution, I thought, gosh, that's quite extreme, isn't it? Like just for a pram. But actually, I think, yeah, even just thinking about myself, there's so many other things I would put in that space if I had it. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, the whole subject of storage in a hallway, I've had so many conversations with people where I say, I think, it's really about being honest with yourself as well, because, you can have um cupboards under stairs with maybe hanging rails, and you put your coats in there ideally, but then people don't put their coats in because it's just that bit much too much of an effort to open the door, take a hanger out, put your coat on, put it back in. So
And they always
instead,
seem to be really packed with the coats that
yes,
never get used.
yes,
So there's
that's
never
it.
room to properly
Yeah,
put your coat in. You
yeah.
have to try and squash them over to the side and, force yours in.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it becomes like an all year round thing. Every single coat everybody in the household owns ends up in there. So, as I say, yeah, many times I've had these types of conversations where I say, well, I know, the best kind of look maybe that you want in your hallway is for it all to be tucked away like that. But what's actually happening is everybody's just throwing their coats on top of like the banisters, the newel post at the end of the stairs, and then they're falling off, and there's one or two in the floor. Or maybe there is like a little bench or a chair or something, and they're getting thrown on there. Or maybe they don't, maybe they end up, in a room, in the living room or something, because it just, they get thrown onto a sofa or something. So anyway, so I do think, back to that kind of functional, practicality point of view, sometimes, having hooks on the walls, that's the thing that does get used, and it keeps.
I was going to say
keeps
it has to go down to a hook, because we sort of are creatures of habit, and when you're picking up your coat every day, it seems like a lot of trouble. But if it's just on a coat stand or a hook, that would work really well then.
Yeah, that's the thing. And what I would say is, if you really can't bear the idea of having the coats in view, but being honest with yourself that you won't put them on that hanger, I think the halfway house, and this is something we do in our house, we converted what used to be the hanging rail with that very problem, and we now have hooks on the inside of the door of that same cabinet. So you can open it and hang the hooks, and then close it, or sorry, hang the coats, I should say, not hang the hooks, and close it. Now, it depending on how big that door is and how much weight it can take, obviously it's not going to take all your coats for the whole year round, so it does require you to be a little bit more decisive about what to
every
keep
once in
there.
a while. On a Saturday, you need to put away which ones you haven't been using.
Yeah. So as I say, whereas if you've got the nice long piece of wall and you can put quite a few hooks, then maybe you can keep all your coats there. So it's just really assessing what's right for you and what you think will give you the solution that will help you keep that space tidy. I think shoes is another one actually that people struggle with sometimes, that shoes don't really have a dedicated space. I think ideally what people think is that the shoes will be kept in each individual person's wardrobe upstairs, but actually the likelihood of them making it up there, particularly if you want to encourage your family to take their shoes off when they come in the door, then the likelihood of them carrying up, well, I know I'm speaking from my own experience as a mother here, the likelihood of people then carrying the shoes upstairs is probably not
slim.
It's quite slim. So so I think the best kind of solution I've seen around shoes really is, I mean, obviously there's racks and things you can get, but I quite like, if you've got a cupboard, instead of the hanging rail, if you're doing the hooks on the door, have some boxes inside labeled with each person's name, and then you can put the shoes in. And I think with the coats and the shoe storage, it's always great if you can have low down options as well. So if you've got small people in the household, you can encourage them from the earliest age possible, to actually put their things away and to take them out and put them on, when it's time to go out.
Yes, indeed. If you're going to encourage them to do that, they need to be able to reach these hooks and have a storage for their shoes accessible to them. And the one that I like is actually the storage bench, Audrey, for shoes, because it's very practical in terms of if you need to sit down to actually put on your shoes, or sit a small person on there rather than sitting them on the floor. Of course, you can have that dual functionality of the storage bench if it lifts up, but easily a chair or a little stool or something like that would help. And it probably goes to whether you're a shoes off or shoes on household as well, especially if you've got guests and you're expecting them to take off their shoes. It's nice for them to have some place to sit and put them back on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the little benches are great. Yeah, if space permits, and that's quite a good solution.
Yes, if I was ever building a house, I would have a nice big wide hallway so that you could do all of these things. And then the other element that I wanted to chat with just lastly is around how we can add some finishing touches to the hallway. And I've seen some really fabulous solutions. I'm thinking if you've got an old door or you want to exclude a draft, I've seen people add curtains to the inside of the door, which can look really nice. And I'm thinking on a metal sort of rail where it's sort of just half hung. I have this vision, Audrey, of walking in and you've got a nice little round table. You've got a big vase of flowers. I think it's what I've seen in one too many movies from the Hamptons or something like that.
Yeah.
But you walk in and it's just like, boom, these beautiful flowers. So adding flowers or plants, or whether you want some scented candles to have a fragrance. There's other little things that you can do to make your hallway sort of homely.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if you've got space for like the console idea we discussed, maybe with the lamp, or if not, a small shelf, then you can think about plants or other things that you want to put on there to add to the finishing touches. But I do agree with you, the curtain can look amazing and can really help as well if it is drafty. Just you do need your door to be wide enough that you've got that space to stack it back and open the door as well. So not everybody has that. But otherwise, if there's other areas where you can bring some fabric into the space, so it could be like that bench idea we talked about, or if it's just a chair where you put shoes on, then think about a cushion on that chair. So just the little touches like that can really make it back into that idea of creating a room in the hallway.
One thing I always remember about hallways, I don't know if you had this, Audrey, but everybody seemed to have in Ireland at one stage this unit, which was a shelf. And then it turned into a chair, and it was all one unit. And the idea was that you'd sit in the chair because you'd have the phone on the little shelf bit with the drawer, and you could put your yellow pages in there.
Yeah.
And I just think about how far we've come to think that we would send somebody out to the cold, inevitably cold, maybe not always, the cold hallway to sit there and take a phone call. And this was sort of the soul. It should have been a phone room nearly rather than a hallway. But I just thought of that, and I thought I'd share it because I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah,
but
no,
everybody had them.
I really do. I remember them so well. Yeah. We didn't actually have one quite like that, but many people I knew did. And occasionally now I see one like in a vintage shop or something. And I don't know. I'm not sure I could actually own one myself.
They don't even look very comfy, the seat bit of it.
No, they don't. No, but it is funny how like it's a real example of a dedicated piece of furniture for like a point in time. And that was like when we used the landline, which is something that although people may still have a landline sometimes now, it won't need to be in a fixed location. And that was, the way it was back then. But yeah, as you say, it was funny. It was in the hall, and I used to take the landline and go into the nearest room and just have the cable like stretching around the corner because I didn't want to be in the hallway with everybody in every room of the house being able to sort of listen in to my conversation if they open the door.
So there's something we won't be recommending for the hallway.
No.
We'll leave them in the vintage shops if that's what if that's what they're saying. I'm really not sure what you'd even use that for now.
Yeah, I don't know. You're getting me thinking now, am I now?
We'll keep you updated on thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
Well, that's been wonderful. I think that you realize actually how much more you can do with the hallway than probably any of us are using ours. And it's the moment, as we say, it's that first moment of inspiration that people get, or maybe not inspiration is the word, it's that insight that people get into your life and your home and your family. So maybe have a look at it and have a wee think about what changes you can make to your hallway.
If you enjoyed our podcast, we would be delighted if you could rate, review and subscribe on your favourite podcast provider. This will help others who are seeking home and furnishing advice and inspiration discover the DNA of home interiors. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter at the DNA of Home Interiors.
If you are looking for inspiration and help in designing your home interiors, take a look at Audrey Whelan's masterclasses on audreywhelan.com/events. And don't forget to check out youfurnish.com, a search and comparison website which helps connect people with amazing furniture from over 100 retailers. We designed it to solve the problem we and thousands like us faced furnishing our homes. And now we are really excited that everyone can search, discover, compare and shop for their home all in one place.
Thank you to our sponsor checkatrade.com for their support in bringing this episode to you. And most importantly, thank you all for listening today.
We hope you can join us next time.